So I finished another book, this one called The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft, which the name Josiah Bancroft sounds like it could be a character in this book. I don't have the actual book with me because a friend lent it to me, so I read it and handed it back. But I made sure to write lots down because a lot, if I want to summarize the story for this, a lot happened. So first of all, it's a book about it's a detective novel. It's about this married couple, these two detectives who go off and do detective stuff, but they detect stuff that has a magical twist to it. So they're like magical detectives. First off, I said first off again. The world, at first, I thought it was a Victorian world with magic, so I'm thinking, oh, it's like steampunk. But then I'm reading more about the technology. I'm like, oh, it's more Edwardian, maybe Georgian. So I finally settled because I need something in my mind to compare it to our world. I said to myself, this must be a 1930s world, but with magic, and it's set in sort of a wacky fantasy version of England. And London specifically. That's how I squared it. So like in terms of technology, they have cars, they have guns, they have like women have rights. There's a House of Lords and a House of Commons and a Parliament, and it feels very much interbellum, the interbellum years in England, from what I understand of real life. Anyways, that's just to sort of situate ourselves in the world. So there's all that, but there's also magic, right? There are dragons, there are mythical beasts and creatures, there's magic. There's sort of four main parts of magic. There's wizards and necromancers, but both of them after the Meridian War, which I took to be World War One, they were sort of banished, kicked out, eliminated, gotten rid of, made illegal. So they are no longer a thing in this world, but they did once exist quite recently. And then the other two are the alchemists, who can still practice alchemy. Alchemists seem to be more of an industrial sort of magic. They are responsible for the production of thalanium, I think it's called, which is the thing that runs all of the cars and electricity and everything. Thalanium is used to create electrohol, which is basically gasoline, from my understanding, or diesel. And they do this, the alchemists do this. Alchemists can do other things, but they do this by transporting organic matter into a hell realm through a portal that is held open by someone called a halo, and is protected by someone called a flail, who beats back the hell demons that are trying to come into the world. So if they pass organic material into the hell realm and then bring it back, it sort of turns into sort of a charcoal thing, which is thalanium, which they use to power their world. So there's alchemists, and there's the final one, the hexologists, which is the name of the book. The hexes, they do hexes. It's sort of lower level magic. It's seen as not a threat, not a big deal, so it's still allowed to function. But that's what our main character Isolde and always will be. Which sounds even crazier when I say it out loud. Her name is and always will be. Wow. So she's a hexologist. She had studied magic, and we find out that she studied illegal magic and was going to try and become a wizard at one point, but that didn't go through. So she's a hexologist and uses her little bit of hexes to solve mysteries. And she used to work for the police agency, the government. I think she was the head of a special branch of the police that dealt with magical stuff, but she quit it because she was like, I don't want to support the system, and she's very much left wing. She doesn't like, she wants to help the little guy out, and she's anti-royalist and anti the nobility and whatnot. She's a bit of an activist. Anyway, so that's the background on her and her husband, Warren Wilby, who is the son of a butcher, and he's like a big guy, but he's very friendly, and he always wants to make friends, and whoever he's talking to, he can get them to sort of come along and see his perspective, because he can he's talking to a sailor, he'll start talking about his time as a sailor. If he's talking to a nobleman, he'll be very polite. And anyways, that's his thing. I don't think he is a hexologist. He's very much not very much, but he does play second fiddle to Isolde a bit. She's very much the main character. So the story itself, those two as a couple, it has to be the most healthiest, perfect couple I've ever, not perfect, but real and true and full of love, and just they have such a great relationship with each other. I don't think I've ever seen anyone write a couple that was just. I mean, they get along great together. They're in love. It's not perfect, and they have secrets, and they keep secrets from each other, but they're aware, and it's just the most healthy relationship I've ever heard of. Not over the top, but like realistically healthy goals, as the kids say. So, yeah, that's the world, right? And our characters. So it starts with the king's secretary coming to them and saying, "Hey, the king's going crazy. He's like really sick. Something's going wrong with him." But anyways, why I'm here is I have a letter that someone sent to the king, and it seems to be from a long lost son, because this king doesn't have any heirs. He does have a sister who has a lot of children, however. Yeah, and this letter is signed with the king's signet ring, which, like, that's crazy. So this must be legitimate. Can you guys investigate for us? And is like, no, we don't investigate for the royalty. I don't want nothing to do with the royalty. And then a wood golem bursts in through their basement and attacks them, and they manage to kill it in the fireplace, what have you. And that's when Is like, okay, there's something else going on here. Someone's gonna attack me. I'm in. I'll do it. We're also introduced at this point to the portmanteau, aka grandfather, granddad. So they have this old canvas bag that was their grandfather's, but that her father, which we'll get to her father, Professor Silas Wilby, used to make it into some sort of a magical bag of holding. Except it's not just a bag of holding; it's like a portal into a giant underground, sealed off, mysterious location archive where her father, the professor, his thing was he would go out into the world and find artifacts, kind of like. This is his that would be the Victorian time, her father's time, sort of British Empire, colonial, whatever. He would go out and collect a whole bunch of magical artifacts. That was like his thing, and he'd store them in this portmanteau, this bag that. And then something happened to her father. They didn't see a body, but they have good proof that he's dead, and after many years they're like, yes, he's dead. However, I think this is the whole plot of the overarching series is what happened to her father. I'll get to that, but anyway, so Is now has this bag that she can reach into and pull out all kinds of sort of magical artifacts, and you never know what's going to be in there. So they grab the bag. Her husband pulls out some magical sword, and that's how they kill this golem. So that's how we start. Is in war. They go to Isolde and Warren is in war. They go to Iz's mom, who is the library at this like mega library archive, and she's like, "All right, we need to find this ring, this king's signet ring." So they do some research, and they're like, "Okay, well, he had the ring at this point, and then he lost it at this point. So at some point during his time at this military hospital, when the king was a prince and younger, during the war." He lost his ring. So they're like, okay. So they go to the hospital, and they find out that the king, who was a prince at the time, was waited on by only one nurse named Jessamine Bliss, who also became known as Jess Blessed. So they're like, aha, a clue. And then they get cornered by these anti-royalist thugs who are like, you're working for the king. And they're like, well, we are, but we hate the king. But anyway, so Isolde jumps into the magical bag of holding while War tries to escape, gets captured, and then talks his way out of it. Meanwhile, is inside of her like father's secret archive of magical mysteries, and turns out there's a dragon in there because one of the things her father had collected was a bunch of dragon eggs, and one of them hatched, and this dragon came out and ate all its siblings, and was able to survive because one of the other magical things in this bag is an infinite goat. A goat that, if you keep eating the goat, as long as the horns remain, it will grow back. And so this dragon has been living there and confronts Isolde, and she's like, "Hey, dragon, this is your home. You've been living here. You probably know a lot more about this than I do. How about you make a catalog and tell me all about this stuff, and also protect this bag from intruders, and we will continue. We will feed you. My husband Warren's a great cook. You must be really tired of eating goat all the time, and also I'm very scrawny, and you wouldn't want to eat me because, like, you eat me once and I'm gone." So they strike up a deal with this dragon named Philovox. And so you can kind of tell there's a very light-hearted feeling, light-hearted vibes to this whole book. It's not dark. It's not grimdark. It's not. I mean, it does deal with real emotions and real issues, but it is kind of fun and silly. Like she shakes hands with a dragon and named Philovox, and anyway. So meanwhile, one of the people who've captured Warren tries to open the bag, reach in and grab something from it. The dragon grabs his arm, pulls him in, and explosions of blood. Isolde climbs back out of the portmanteau, and they leave with Warren. The anti-royalists let them go because they're like, they have a dragon in their bag. What the heck? So then they visit this imp who possesses drunk people in a bar. See, this is another thing where there's like, this isn't the setup where we find out about this young woman who wants to become a detective, and which is very much, we're thrown into the midst of it, where she's like, every time she has a case, she goes to see her mom, and then if she needs this thing, she has a person for every sort of thing. So this is her person for this issue. She wants to find out this imp who knows about the dead. So they go to this imp. They're like, "Hey, Jess Bless, where's she at?" And the imp's like, "Yeah, no, she's dead. She's in this graveyard." "Cool, thanks." So they go to the grave and pulls out another magical artifact. This one allows them to open up a portal to the Nethercroft, which is some sort of a gallery of events and memories that the dead can create for other dead to come and visit. So that gives them sort of an overview of Jess's life. There's a very important scene where something happened in an alleyway, something very violent, where the undead ghouls had eaten away at this memory, so it wasn't totally visible to them, but it's important later, of course. And they find out that she was pregnant, and that the king gave her his signet ring and said, "Look, I'm sorry about my attendant, this guy named Atherton. I'm sorry about what he did to you, what he made you become. But hey, here's this ring. Go into hiding, and it'll all work out." So they're like, okay, so she was pregnant, but her child was not the king's son, but this other attendant's son, and the child probably inherited the ring and was thought, "Oh, I'm the king's son," but is actually not. So they're like, oh dear. Case solved? ? So then all the ghouls start attacking and almost get Warren, but they manage to escape. But Warren's like incapacitated from this attack, so he rests while his father Morris comes over to watch over him. And this gives Iz a chance to go off by herself. And so she goes to this wizard. Even though wizards aren't supposed to exist anymore, there is one, and she knows him because she went to school with him, and she actually introduced him to wizardry, but he was really good at it, and she wasn't, so she sort of just sticked with being a hexologist. Anyways, so there was some more backstory. So she's like, "Hey, you're a powerful wizard, help me out with this investigation," and basically he's like, "No." So then they go and she goes back, gets Warren, and then they go visit Atherton's brother, who's like this powerful noble guy, and he's like, doesn't really like his brother, and they sort of push the wrong buttons, and then he throws them out. So then they're like, okay, we're running out of options here, but then Iz is like, well, that alleyway from that memory that was eaten away at, we never really got to figure out, something major happened there, and she's like thinking about it, and she's like, okay, if the stones are this way, and there was a gargoyle here, and Yeah, I know where that is. Let's go. So they go to the place, and they meet a midwife there who happened to be a midwife at this nursery at that location when this happened. She's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I was there. I'll tell you the whole deal. So it turns out that the prince and Jess accidentally killed this guy Atherton, the father of Jess's child, because he was like, no, I'm like a nobleman. I don't want to deal with this child. And the prince was like, no, you have to, my dude. Like, Jess is great. She looked after me. And then he attacked her, but Jess was holding his sword, and then he accidentally stabbed himself with his sword, but it was like Jess killed him, and it was just a big horrible thing. And then the king and the slash prince at the time, they had to cover it up. And so we're like, okay, mystery solved. That was it. It was Jess had a child, but it wasn't actually the king's child, and it was all just an unfortunate accidental death and murder slash murder and a cover up. And so we're like, okay, we've solved the issue, but we're only halfway through the book at this point, so. This happens a few times where you're like, okay, now we've solved it. And then something else happens. It's like, okay, well, now we've solved it. It's like twisty, twisty, twist. Is in war. They call the royal secretary and explain what they figured out. They're like, yeah, there was a child, but he's not actually the king's child. So if he comes forward to present his claim or her claim, it won't come to anything because they're not actually the child of the king. The case closed, except for the golem, the initial golem that broke in. Like, who sent that? And also there were some birds, a flock of birds that came to talk to them. They're like, it must be a powerful wizard that's controlling these birds, because the birds were trying to scare it, saying like, don't investigate this further. So there's just those two little things that are telling us there's more to this. So there's sort of not an interlude, but they go back to their life. They're like, yeah, we finished the case, we reported, we got paid, etc. And then they find out in the paper that this midwife, who was a witness to the whole thing, has been killed. And her death's made to look natural, but they're like, oh, I don't think so. So Ace is like, all right, case is back open, case unclosed. They're like, we got to find out who this kid was, this orphan, one of Jess's orphans. So they go back to the mom in the library archive, and they find the name Henry Blessed. So like, okay, this is the kid. This Henry Blessed was adopted by this alchemist magnate named Victor, who adopted a whole bunch of kids as a big social experiment to find out whether, not eugenics, social Darwinism, what's the word? But he basically wanted to find out whether children, it was nature versus nurture. He wanted to find out whether children born to lower class parents, if raised in a higher class setting, could become, could be as good as the aristocracy and as whatever. So it just so happens they get invited to this guy Victor's party. He's been inviting them forever, but they're like, no, we're not going to go. So they go to this party, and Warren, his job is to like do the schmoozing in the party, and then because he's the social guy, and his is like, I'm gonna sneak off and go see what I can see. So she gets another magical artifact, this ring that if you put in your mouth, it transports you to a shadow realm, and you can teleport around. So she does that, and she doesn't find anything about Henry Blessed, but she does find, other than what Victor told them initially, that he had died tragically. She does find the mystery to Victor's vast wealth. He's an alchemist who creates thalanium, but like most alchemists, they've ran out of organic material. Usually they ship lumber in and run lumber through the Hell Realm to create this thalanium, but they've deforested so much of the population. It's kind of an overarching thing that like they're in sort of the heart of the Industrial Revolution, and there's so much pollution and smog and this like acid rain and just very horrible things, which made me think it was Industrial Revolution Victorian, but it's post that. Anyways, most people have run out of organic material to use, but she finds out that he's using this thing called braid magic, this sort of old, not really thought of anymore magic, where if you tie a braid around something organic, it grows really big. So he's using like weeds from his garden that he wraps in braid magic, which makes it grow really big, and then he can ship it through the Hell Realm, get a ton of thalanium back, and make a lot of money. So she gets caught breaking into this place, and he's like, "Look, this is proprietary information. You can't tell anyone about this. Get the heck out of here." So they both go home. They're like, "Oh man, we didn't find anything out about Henry Blessed." At some point, they do make the connection that the wood golem that attacked them had a belt that was a braid, and this wood golem was made by braid magic. Oh, that's when they make this connection. So back at home, Iz makes some kind of magic, or finds some kind of magical spider in her fireplace where the golem had burned, and it's like has these twinkly, glowy spores around it. Which, when she was at Victor's place, she noticed these spores coming out of the hell portal, and anyways, so that's how she connects the golem to Victor. And she's like, it was Victor who did it. So, and then they're like, well, what do we do now? And then Warren's like, well, while you were sneaking around, I met with the nanny of these children, who gave me an address and the name of one of the other children. So they're like, great, there's a lead. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, this social experiment, because we was actually to try and create magical children. I say at this point because at this point, when they go to meet this child, they run into someone who's a wizard, a necromancer, a hexologist, and an alchemist, all in one, which is called a sorcerer. If you can somehow master all four, whatever. So I'm like, oh, this is the kid that they've gone to meet. Is one of these successful social experiments, but that's or magical experiments. That is not the case. They just meet this sorcerer. There's a big battle. The sorcerer opens a portal to hell, and a hell beast attacks Warren, and eventually he's able to defeat it using a series of magical implements from their bag of holding. It's a big thing. They manage to, anyway, they win. Let's say they win. They kick the sorcerer back through a portal, and they're really shook up, but they're like, well, someone really doesn't want us to find something else, so we're going to go find it out. So they go into the sweatshop where one of these children works, and that's when I'm like, oh, this is actually someone different. The sorcerer is not one of the children. One of the children is working in a sweatshop at this point. So they talk to her, and she reveals that, yeah, Henry, who died, actually he didn't die. He faked his death, and I saw him come back, and he took on the name of Allman, I think it is, which is the name of the royal secretary. So it turns out that the royal secretary who initiated this whole thing was Henry Blessed, Jess Blessed's son, who had inherited the signet ring. And so it was like, okay, he thought, inheriting this ring, that he was actually the son of the king. And that's why Victor, when he adopted him and found he had this ring, was like, okay, we're going to have to fake your death and create a new persona for you, that you're one of the nobles, so you can get into the king's household, find out if you're actually his son, and we can make you the king. And then Victor becomes powerful, and et cetera, et cetera. So we're like, oh, okay, case closed again. And he's also gotten close to the king as he's using these hell spores to poison the king. And that's why the king's kind of going crazy and is quite ill, is because Henry's been poisoning him in his capacity as the royal secretary. So they're like, whoa, big reveal. We have to get to the king. So they somehow get an audience with the king. They meet with Princess Constantine, who is the king's sister, who is like, I've been trying everything. I can't solve the king's illness. And Isolde's like, it was the secretary. He's been poisoning him. Victor's been helping him out, getting him spores from the Hell Realm, because Victor and the secretary think that they're the son of the king, but actually they're the son of this other nobleman who was friends with the king. And blow the case wide open. She uses some hex about ringworm fungal infection and like cures the king. And Constantine's like, great, thanks so much, cool. Constantina, maybe is her name. And they're like, they go to apprehend Henry, the secretary, and he's gone. So they're like, oh no, he must have went back to our house to steal the portmanteau, because everyone's trying to steal this portmanteau, because why wouldn't you? It's full of crazy magical artifacts. But when they get back, we find Henry lying bleeding out without an arm, because of course he reached into the bag and there's a dragon in there, and the dragon ate his arm. And so he dies. And the royals, they come to confiscate all the evidence. But something's not adding up, because we still have the mysterious birds and the sorcerer, and Daisy is like, oh, I don't know who. There's another level to this. Her detective senses tell her. So she's like, Warren, distract them. So Warren's like, okay, uses the dragon in the bag to form a distraction, while Iz goes off back to that her wizard friend, and is like, look, something big's going on. There's a sorcerer out there. I need your help. And he's like, okay, fine. I'll take you to this earth goddess thing, which is kind of cool. He takes her there, and the earth goddess is like, for the price of 1 year of your afterlife, I will let you see through the eyes of any gargoyle in the city at any time. So her thing is like, when people die, they have to work for her and like inhabit gargoyles for an X amount of time, and whatever they see, she sees. So she has like this sort of panopticon of all of history, whatever. So she agrees, and she's like, show me that scene in the alleyway. So then we get the real truth. It turns out that Henry was the king of the sun, was the son of the king. In the alleyway, the king was like, Prince at the time, was like, Jess, you have to abort this baby. I can't have it. I'm going to be the king. And Atherton was like, what are you talking about, my dude? You're going to be the king. You're so cool and a nice guy. Let her have the baby. She's been so nice to us. And then the king was like, no, and killed Atherton. And was like, oh no, I've killed my best friend. How am I going to cover this up? And then Princess Constantina shows up and is like, bro, what the heck? I'm a sorcerer. She's the sorcerer. So she uses mind magic to change everyone's memories of the events and the whole thing. So that's the big reveal. So then Is like, oh crap, she's the sorceress, the freaking princess, the king's sister. I'm way in over my head. Rushes back to Warren. She goes to the royal people who are like, give us the evidence now. We've been waiting forever. She's like, yeah, no, take it. Just take it. Like, we're good, right? I don't want anything to do with this. Yeah, she gives all the, and then makes a deal with the princess. She's like, the princess comes to her in the flock of birds, and it turns out the princess is the flock of birds, and is like, well, thanks so much for solving the issue and curing my brother. The princess doesn't know that Iz knows that she's the sorcerer and all this, and Iz is like, yeah, no problem. Just if you can do me a favor, never ask me to do anything for you again, because I don't work for the royals. That's my whole thing. And the princess is like, okay, fine, that's cool. So she's like, phew, we're safe. And then Iz and War go off to their next adventure. It literally ends with the police constable showing up at the door saying, there's a horse loose in town. They're like, what do you mean a horse? They're like, it's the size of a building, and it's attacking everyone and breathing fire. And they're like, grab the bag. We're off to the next adventure. And that's how it ends. But then the epilogue is Princess Constance? Whatever her name is. Turns out she's been sleeping with Victor and using Victor and his money and everything for nefarious purposes. But when Victor used Henry to try and kill the king, that was without her knowledge. And so she's quite likes her brother. So she was like, how dare you? And she kills Victor. And she's like, Mwahaha, I will rule the kingdom now? ? Or just rule it from the shadows, or help her brother, the king, rule it. I don't know. Anyways, so that's the whole plot of the whole book. Lots of twists and turns, lots to it. Not that it seemed to drag on, but there was a lot. But it was really well written. His use of vocabulary, the author has a wonderful diction, and it's very loquacious. writer, and he used a lot of words that you don't see too often, but used them very well. Yeah, so it was a fun adventure. It was very funny, very light-hearted, but still like a really good mystery. If you like a good mystery novel, well, too bad I spoiled the whole plot. But presumably this just came out. Presumably there's a trilogy, and it lends itself to serialization, right? The next adventure, with the overarching threat or mystery of the princess slash sorcerer, and also her father. Like, if she's a detective, why can't she detect what happened to her father? And she doesn't want to, personal reasons. But I think that's sort of our overarching plot going into the third novel, whenever that comes out. So yeah, that was The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft. An absolute treat. It was a fun book. Yeah, so that's it.